So I wanted to get on here because I was going to make some cloth masks, and then my daughter wanted to help. So I was like, hey, let's make a video. It is a little bit long because it's detailed, which is kind of nice for people who, you know, don't sew very much, and can also give you a lot of tips for sewing things in the future. It's actually required here in California to wear a mask now when you go out in public. So I decided let's just see what we had, and I made some. They are 100% cotton. There's no plastic in it. And my daughter was like, hey, you can use these for a lot of other things. You know, if you're out in the yard and you just kind of need a light mask, they're way better than, you know, trying to put a bandana on or something. And yeah, so we made this video, and the masks are pretty cool. I've been collecting, you know, really cute fabric for a long time, so we just used what we had on hand, and yeah, they can be used for a lot of different things. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Okay, I just wanted to jump in here and alter the video real quick, because when I was offering this to people, they wanted for me to leave an opening in. So it's the same design. I just stitched the top to give a finished edge, and then move the straps to the side, and then stitch it all together. And then I came in here about 2.5 inches and stitched up here just so it's a smaller pocket. You know, with these times, people are getting very concerned and desperate. I have really mixed feelings, but I can see where, like, even at home, out in the yard or on the farm, you could put a filter or a mask in here to keep it cleaner. But yeah, so here's how I altered my design. Okay, this video is going to go into detail how to make this cloth mask. I think of it as like the ninja style, and it has cloth straps. So we'll show you, this is the front. It has a pattern and then a back. It just has a thicker material on the back, and it has a liner inside. And then we'll show you how to put it on. So the top straps tie up top, and the strings are nice and long to make it easy. And then the bottom straps go around your neck. And then it goes high up your nose, just like that. Okay, so we're gonna go over how you get the pattern for the mask. I call this style type of mask like the ninja mask. And I actually went on the internet and I looked for different patterns, and then I kind of altered it. So the best material is to make it like out of a cereal box, the cardboard. But I'm going to show you the dimensions. So if you go on the internet and you find a pattern that's this shape, it might be a little easier to reference it. What I did is I made this arch here, this mountain, more smaller than the original pattern, but this is 4 inches by 4 inches and a quarter. So if you take your piece of paper or on your cardboard and you do measure 4 inches to get this measurement, this side, and then 4 1/4 to get this side, and then from this point you go up in a right angle again 6 inches, and you make this line, and then at the widest point is just above the halfway part is where the widest of this circle, half circle, is, and that is 1 1/4 inches. So if you make a point here where you say it's the widest point, which is just above the halfway point, you make a circle here, and then you'll go from this point, make the circle, you're going to hit that widest point, then come back down to this point. And then if you go back up here, and then here you want to get this mountain shape. So if you go from this point and kind of make a mountain shape. And then here's your pattern. And like I said, if you go on the internet and you look for other patterns that are already out there and you print them out and they're 4 inches by 4 inches and a quarter, it might help you get this. And like I said, all I did was alter this angle here. The original one, the angle was much more pointier. And when I worked it out, it didn't fit my face really well. So I made this angle less. Okay, so that's how you get the pattern. And then with this pattern, you'll cut out all the different fabrics. We need to iron and fold first. So I'll show you how we do that. So we're going to fold in half and iron to make a crease in the center. And then we open it up, and then we fold one end to the center, iron all the way along, and we cut these strips 18 inches. You could probably get away with 16 inches long by 1.5 inches wide. So she's turning it around and then folding it halfway up on the other side. And just take your time, because this will really help when you stitch it, if it's nice and crisp. And then she's going to fold it again in half. So that way all the raw edges are tucked inside. And then you just iron so it holds in place. And then we'll go on the sewing machine and stitch it. To stitch the strap, what I like to do is have the opening going towards my right hand, and then bring it down to the foot. I like to make sure the edge of the strap is going to be underneath the needle. Make sure that your string is in the back and kind of tight. And then I put my foot down, and you're going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the top to close up the strap. And this is going to make a nice finished edge. And then I like to take my left hand and place my finger down here, and I use it as a guide. I put my right hand on top and then put my foot on the pedal and go slowly, especially in the beginning, just to get it started. And then I got to make sure that it's all lined up. And then I just go along. And take your time. And you really got to kind of feel it. And you can feel when the cloth isn't in place. And that's why you want to go slow, because that also helps make sure that you do it right. And then when it gets towards the end, I like to hold the strap in the back. I still use my left hand as the guide and just go along slowly. And then you always want to make sure your needle is in the up position when you stop. And then you just rise your foot, make sure the strings are all out, and then clip it here. And that's it for the strap. So now it's just one finished piece. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the different fabrics. So I'm really just using any fabric that I had around, and they're all 100% cotton. So these, I had a bunch of, I mainly been collecting a bunch of different cute fabrics, and this is what I'm using on hand. So it is all cotton. Now these fruit, or like this one here, they are much thinner fabric than this. This is more like an upholstery, thick cotton, and then this is like a canvas. So what I'm going to do is one layer is going to be a cute fabric, and then the inner layer is going to be the white sheet fabric, and then the inner layer, or it could be an outer layer, it's reversible, is this thicker canvas. And when you cut out the pattern ones, you do have to be careful that when you fold it and you cut it, you get two pieces that are facing the same way. So when you stitch them, they're all facing the same way. I did find that patterns with smaller patterns make better. So with the owl, I actually took the pattern and I went through each of the fabric and cut individual owls out. You waste a lot more fabric. And then like this fabric, because of this kind of pattern, it was actually kind of more complicated to cut out to make sure we had two matching ones. So what we do when I start is you cut all the different fabrics out, and I start with this pattern one, and you have the right sides together, and then I take the liner, put it one on top and then one on the bottom. Now if you're using thinner fabric, you could do another liner fabric, but they're all going to have this thick canvas. So like with this one, you could stitch another liner on here. So what I do here, now I'll go to the sewing machine and I'll stitch along this edge, and that will be 4 pieces. And then I come along here, and same thing with the arch side, I stitch here. This is just 2 layers. Now if using thinner fabric, you can have a liner, and this would be 4 pieces too. Okay, so I'm going to start with this side. This is the one with 4 pieces, and I'm actually going to start on the end that is not, it's the bottom. It's not where the point is. And I'm going to do a seam allowance of 3/8, which is like this first line on my sewing machine. I'm going to make sure my thread is in the back and kind of taut. And then I'm going to put the fabric where it's just, the needle is just on top of the fabric. Then I put my foot down, and then I'm going to start to stitch a couple of them. I'm going to make sure my needle is up, and then I'm going to go back on my machine and back stitch just to the edge of the fabric. And then we'll go back and stitch around, and I'll just follow the line and make sure the arch is being stitched. Now sometimes with certain fabrics it wants to bind up a little bit, so I find if you hold the back and hold it tight, it will keep the stitch nice and tight. But you still have to do it slowly, so you're making sure you stay on the line and you're following the curve. And then when you get close to the end, you just do it slow, and then I'll go to the edge, make sure your needle is up, and then go to your machine and back stitch, and then come back. You always want to make sure your needle is on the up position when you back stitch, because when you use the button to back stitch, it actually pushes on the needle, and if the needle is in the fabric, it can easily break your needle. So then you just make sure your needle's on up position, raise your foot. Now make sure that the stitch here is nice and tight. Sometimes it binds up Now just make sure it's all flat and the stitch is flat, and you cut your string. Okay, so I'm going to do the other side. So this is the one that's the canvas, and it just has 2 pieces of fabric. I'll line it up the same. Couple of stitches, make sure the needle's in the up position, back stitch, and then follow the curve around. Make sure that the stitch is all nice and flat, and then back stitch. Okay. So then these are your 2 halves. So I'm going to show you how to put on the straps. So I'm going to take this side, which would be the back, and it's the one that just had the 2 layers. It's the thicker canvas. You're going to open it up so the finished edge is inside and the point is facing up. And then I'm going to take the strap and start on the right side, and you go a 1/2 inch in, and then you place your strap just like this. And then I'm actually just gonna stitch it in place. So this is tack. Okay, so now I'm gonna take it to the sewing machine and I'm gonna tack it in. So I'm gonna place the needle in the foot just right under the strap and tack it. It's usually just a couple of stitches. Make sure it's in the up position, go back on itself. And that's it. And I will tack all 4 straps first. You can pin it, but I was finding it was hard when you get it all together to have the pins in it. So I just tack them all in. So again, on the left side, take another strap, have the opening facing the outer part, and you go half inch in, and you tack it. And then for the bottom, you're going to take the strap and again a 1/2 inch up and tack it. And then all the straps are tacked with the little tail kind of facing out. And then you stitch them all to tack them in. Okay, so after you get all the straps on, I just tacked them in, but now they're in place. You're going to gather them up. You're going to put them in the inside, in the finished part, which is the inside. And then you're going to take the next layer and you're going to open it up, and the right side is going to go inside with the point facing up. And then what I do, then I will pin the edges, making sure that all the layers are lined up. And then you see all the straps are going to be inside. When you come to their seam here, I'm going to open them up where you can flatten them out like this, and the same thing here where you flatten them out. I put the seam together, and I actually put the needle in the seam of both the pieces. So that will line up the seam. So finish pinning the corners. I don't need to pin anymore. A lot of times I feel like the more pins, they just kind of get in the way when you stitch. So I'm just doing just the bare minimum to kind of line everything up. So again, in the center here, open up the seam here to flatten it out. Pin in the center of the stitch. Okay, so it's pinned to all four corners and in the center. And then I just make sure that the straps are all inside, and then I'll come and stitch. So I'm actually going to start stitching this corner, go all the way up, around, 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 and then to the middle point here, and leave this section open. Okay, I go to the sewing machine. Okay, so this is the edge that I'm going to start with. Make sure everything's lined up. Take the pin out. Line it underneath the foot. And however you want to give your seam allowance, you can give 5/8. I actually never really do that much. I usually just kind of line up the edge of the fabric to the edge of my foot. But you're going to start where the needle is just going to be over the fabric here in the corner. Put your foot down, and I will put the needle in the fabric just one time, and then make sure I line up everything. So there's this first strap right here, and I'm going to get my finger in there. I'm going to make sure the strap is nice and flat and straight and lined up before I stitch. And I'm going to kind of hold here and hold here, and I'm going to stitch a couple and come back, make sure my needle is up, back stitch, and then I'm going to carefully stitch over the strap. Since the strap is pretty thick fabric, you kind of have to be careful. Okay, and then make sure my needle is up, and I'm going to go back over that strap. I'm going to go back over that strap because it's at a tension point, and I want to make sure it's nicely and secure in there. So then I'm going to go back over it, stitch to the corner, take the needle out, and then I'm going to make sure my needle is in the fabric, put my foot up, make the angle, make sure that this stitch here and the thread is nice and flat, put my foot back down, and make sure that all the straps are inside, that this next strap is all lined up, that the fabric is all lined up, it's all flat, and I'll go over the strap, and then I'm going to back stitch up over it again and back over it, and then I'm going to go up this one, and then you're going to get into this center here where all these seam is, and it needs to be flat. So I usually just take my time, take the needle out, make sure that they're all lined up, that they're all flat, and just take your time. I would say that this is not for beginners, but if you take your time, you probably could. Now I'm going to go over all these layers, making sure that they're all flat. I'm going to go over it, and then I'm going to go back over again, and then back over. Just again, because I feel like that's kind of another tension point where all these seams are coming together. I want to make sure it's nice and secure. And then I will come back. I'm coming up to the next corner and a strap. I'm going to take the needle out, make sure the strap is all lined up and flat. Go over it. Back stitch over it. And then come to this corner, make sure the needle is in the fabric, make that turn, make sure that all the stitch is flat, and then you're going to go down this side. You come into a strap and a corner. I take the needle out and make sure that all the straps are not in the way of the foot. You really got to feel in there and that the strap is flat. we're going to go over it, go back over it, and come through. Make sure the needle is in, make that angle, make sure it's all flat. And come down. Now you're going to come back into the center, make sure everything is flat. Take your pin out. Everything's lined up. When you stitch, you got to make sure that all the straps are pushed in and you're not going to get over it. And sometimes I'll just manual do it to make sure that I've gotten all the fabric, and so it was kind of not, the seam wasn't open, so I put the foot up, make sure it's flat under there again. Stitch over it. I'm going to go back over it again. Come through. Make sure all the straps are tucked in. See this here? It needs to be tucked in there. Oh, actually, this is where you stop. You're going to leave this open. So I'm just going to back stitch here. Make sure your needle is up. Take it out. So we've stitched all around. I'm going to come back. I'm going to cut these little tails off from the straps. Oh, I have a hard time saying that word. And then if there's any strings that I can see, I'm going to cut. Okay, and then there was this hole here, and I'm going to flip it out, get all the straps, and then you just kind of pull it to make sure all the straps are out, that all the seams, all the points are out and pointy. You can put your finger inside and push out these corners if you need to. Okay, here's the top part. I'm just going to make sure that that point and the pieces are all flat in. So this is the pattern side. This is the cream part. And you can see the straps, 2 are facing up and 2 facing out. And if there's any strings, you can cut them out. Here is the hole. You're just going to fold in the raw edges inside. So then the raw edges are inside. And then you're going to come back and stitch along the bottom. So this is the open edge. I'm going to fold it all in. Now when you come to this edge, it's actually really bulky here because you have the strap in there. So I'm not going to start stitching until like here, which is fine. I mean, this is a mask. It's still going to close it all up, because if you start here, it's way too bulky and you're going to break your needle. So I'm going to put it under the foot, and we're just going to get it over where all that bulkiness is. Put your foot down. And I actually like to do this manually so I can kind of feel that I'm not in the bulky part, because you will break a needle. So I just make sure all the raw edges are tucked in. And you can go back over yourself a couple stitches. And you're just closing up that hole. Now when you get in the center here, it's thick, so take your time. You can manually kind of get in there so you can get over the thick part, and then go along the bottom, kind of stop where it starts to get thick, back stitch, and cut it. Okay, so I will cut any of the strings, and then with the straps here at the ends, I will come along and stitch it here to tack it on the sewing machine. Okay, so you just tack it, and that just helps this raw edge not fray as much. And you'll do that with all 4 ends of the strap, and then you're done.